Kwame was once the envy of the village, strong, wise, and respected by all. His name carried weight among the elders, his counsel sought after, his laughter filling the air of moonlit gatherings. But to Amara, he was more than a leader, he was the love of her life. She had married him young, her heart swelling with devotion, and their love had been the kind of story the village griots sang about. Now, Amara's belly swelled with their first child, a blessing she had prayed for every night beneath the ancient baobab tree. Her days were spent preparing for the baby's arrival, weaving tiny garments, and cooking Kwame's favorite meals. She had always been a doting wife, but now, she was more careful than ever, ensuring that Kwame never lacked anything. His happiness was her happiness. Yet, something had shifted. It started subtly, the way Kwame came home later than usual, the way he sat in silence, staring into the distance as Amara spoke. At first, she thought he was simply tired, that the weight of his responsibilities was growing heavier. But then, he stopped reaching for her at night. His touch, once warm and full of promise, had turned cold. The whispers began before Amara even sensed the truth. Kwame has changed, the women murmured as they pounded yam in the village square. His heart is no longer in his home. Did you see the way he looked at her? Another voice chimed in, hushed but eager. He is bewitched. The her they spoke of was Zola, the newcomer. Zola had arrived in the village weeks ago, a traveler from a distant land, seeking refuge with distant relatives. She was young, with skin like polished ebony and eyes that shimmered like river water under the sun. Her laughter was like music, her presence like the gentle caress of the evening breeze. Kwame had noticed her immediately. At first, it was just a glance, a fleeting moment of admiration. But soon, it became more. A stolen moment at the market, an unnecessary offer to carry her water pot, a lingering smile exchanged under the shade of the palm trees. And while the villagers whispered, Amara remained oblivious, her heart still beating for the man she had vowed to love forever. The night breeze carried the scent of burning wood and roasting maize, but to Amara, it carried something else, a growing distance between her and her husband. Yet, she held on to hope, held on to love. Because surely, a love as strong as theirs could not crumble so easily. Could it? You said. Bro, don't reduce word count, gimme exact word count described in outline. ChatGPT said. Got it. Here's the full 800-word expansion of your outline section. A love once strong, 800 words. Kwame was a man of honor, a figure of wisdom in the village. His presence commanded respect, his voice carried authority. The elders consulted him on matters of land and trade, and the young men aspired to be like him, strong, fearless, and noble. But among all his admirers, none loved him more than his wife, Amara. Amara had been his faithful companion for years, standing by him through every trial. She had married him out of love, her heart overflowing with devotion, and she never doubted that they were meant to be. Her days were filled with joy, preparing his meals, ensuring his needs were met, and listening to his stories late into the night. She felt blessed beyond measure, and now, carrying their first child, she believed their love had reached its highest peak. The village women often said that Amara was a rare wife, one who gave everything without asking for much in return. She was patient, nurturing, and kind, never once raising her voice at Kwame, even when he became moody or withdrawn. She believed in him, trusted in their bond, and looked forward to the day they would raise their child together. But something had changed. At first, it was subtle. Kwame, once eager to return home after his long days, began to linger in the village square, speaking in hushed tones with the other men. His laughter, which once filled their hut, had become scarce. He started coming home later, his mind seemingly elsewhere, his eyes distracted. Amara noticed but convinced herself it was exhaustion. The baby was coming soon, and perhaps Kwame was simply worried about providing for them. She continued to cook his favorite meals, rub his shoulders at night, and assure him that they would be fine. But then, the whispers began. It started among the women at the river, their voices hushed but sharp. Kwame has changed, one of them murmured as they pounded yam in the village square. He barely looks at Amara anymore, another agreed. But do you blame him? Have you seen her? Amara frowned, her grip tightening on the basket of cassava she carried. They were talking about someone. A woman. Zola. The name sent a strange shiver down Amara's spine. Zola had arrived in the village weeks ago, a traveler from a distant land who had come to stay with distant relatives. She was younger than Amara, barely out of girlhood but possessing a beauty that made heads turn. Her skin was smooth, dark like the midnight sky, and her eyes shone like river water under the sun. She was elegant, her laughter light and musical. The men took notice of her immediately, Kwame included. At first, Amara thought little of it. After all, Kwame was a married man, a man about to become a father. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. She saw how Kwame's eyes followed Zola whenever she passed. How he suddenly became eager to visit the market at odd hours, the same hours Zola happened to be there. How his shoulders tensed when her name was spoken. And then, there were the moments Amara wasn't supposed to see. Kwame fetching water from the well, something he hadn't done in years, just to be near Zola. Kwame standing a little too close to her beneath the baobab tree, whispering words only she could hear. Kwame laughing again, laughing in a way he hadn't in months. The weight in Amara's chest grew heavier each day. She tried to ignore it. She told herself she was imagining things, that the whispers of the village women were nothing but idle gossip. But then came the moment that shattered her world. One evening, just as the sun painted the sky in deep orange hues, Amara went in search of Kwame. She was feeling unwell, her belly tight with discomfort, and she longed for his presence. She wanted him to sit with her, to remind her that they were in this together. But as she approached the outskirts of the village, she saw them. Kwame and Zola. Together. He was standing close to her, his hands wrapped around hers in a way that no married man should ever touch another woman. And Zola, though bashful, did not pull away. Their eyes locked in an unspoken promise, one that shattered everything Amara had believed in. Her breath hitched. The weight in her chest cracked into something unbearable. Kwame turned and saw her then. For a moment, there was only silence. Amara's hands trembled at her sides. She searched his face for remorse, for hesitation, for anything that could tell her that this was not what it seemed. But Kwame did not look away. He did not step back. And in that moment, Amara knew. Her love, the love she had built her life around, the love she had fought for, was slipping away. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. Kwame had always been a man of discipline, bound by the values of his ancestors, a man who understood duty. But when Zola arrived in the village, something within him shifted. It started as curiosity. She was unlike the women he had known all his life, her presence was magnetic, her laughter light and unburdened. She moved with a confidence that was both innocent and dangerous, her dark skin glowing beneath the African sun, her eyes filled with unspoken secrets. She was young, untouched by the weight of responsibility, and she carried herself with the kind of energy that made a man feel alive again. At first, Kwame resisted. He reminded himself that he had a wife, a home, a child on the way. Amara had given him everything, her love, her loyalty, her very being. She had stood by him when times were difficult, never once wavering in her devotion. She had cooked for him, cared for him, sacrificed her comfort to build their life together. But then, he would see Zola. She would pass by the river where he stood talking with the elders, her steps deliberate, her head held high. She would pause just long enough for their eyes to meet, her lips curving into the smallest of smiles. She never spoke too much, never made it obvious. And yet, Kwame felt it, the invitation in her gaze, the way her presence stirred something deep within him that had long been dormant. She was a flame, and he was a man who had forgotten what it felt like to burn. The village noticed before Amara did. The men laughed about it in hushed voices, slapping Kwame on the back. "Zola has caught you, my friend," they joked, their eyes filled with understanding. The women whispered among themselves, some with pity, others with disdain. And Zola? Zola knew. She was not naive, she had seen the way Kwame looked at her, the hunger in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. She did not shy away from it. She leaned into it, allowing their hands to brush when they passed each other, letting her fingers linger just a little too long when handing him fruit at the market. She never chased. She didn't have to. Kwame came to her willingly. At first, it was just stolen moments, standing too close under the shade of the baobab tree, speaking in voices too soft for others to hear. Then, it became longer absences from home. He would leave early in the morning, finding any excuse to pass by the part of the village where Zola stayed. He stopped helping Amara with the heavy chores. He stopped asking how she was feeling. And Amara noticed. She was 7 months pregnant now, her body heavy with the life growing inside her. Yet, her heart felt heavier than anything. Kwame barely looked at her anymore. When he came home, he was distant, his mind elsewhere. He avoided her touch, muttered short replies when she spoke, and left the house before the sun rose, returning only when the stars had taken the sky. She told herself it was stress. That he was worried about the baby. That maybe she wasn't as beautiful as she used to be. She tried harder, she made his favorite meals, even when the smell of food made her sick. She waited for him at the door, her hands resting on her swollen belly, hoping that tonight he would come home early, that tonight he would take her in his arms and tell her she was still his. But each night, she was left waiting. Until one evening, he did come home early. But not for the reason she had hoped. Kwame stood at the doorway, his face unreadable, his eyes dark with something she had never seen before. "Amara," he said, his voice rough. "We need to talk." Her heart pounded. She sat down slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the wooden stool. "What is it, my love?" Kwame did not sit. He did not soften his words. He spoke them like a hammer against stone. "I no longer love you." Silence. The words did not seem real. They hung in the air between them, sharp and unforgiving. Amara blinked, shaking her head slightly. "Kwame, what are you saying?" His jaw tightened. He looked away, as if the sight of her hurt him. Or perhaps, he simply did not care anymore. "I have tried to fight it," he continued, his tone flat. "But I cannot lie to myself. My heart, it belongs elsewhere." The room swayed. Amara felt as though she had been struck. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, Kwame. You are tired. You are confused. This is not confusion," he interrupted, his voice sharp. "I know what I feel." Tears welled in Amara's eyes, burning hot against her skin. "And what about me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What about our child? Do we mean nothing to you?" Something flickered across Kwame's face. Guilt, perhaps. But it was fleeting, gone before it could take root. "You will be taken care of," he said, his voice distant. "I will provide for you. But I cannot stay in a life that no longer belongs to me." A sob tore through Amara's throat. She wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see what he was throwing away. But even as she reached for him, he took a step back. The distance between them had never felt so vast. And in that moment, she realized, she had already lost him. Kwame did not hesitate. He packed his belongings that very night, ignoring Amara's cries, her trembling hands clutching at his arm. He did not turn back as she begged, as she sobbed, as she whispered, "Please, Kwame, don't do this." Her voice broke, but his resolve did not. Zola was waiting for him. She stood outside her hut, bathed in the golden glow of the torches, her face serene as if she had expected this moment all along. When Kwame arrived, breathless from leaving behind a life he had built, she simply smiled and took his hand. That night, Amara lay curled on the cold floor of their home, tears soaking into the earth beneath her. Her heart felt as if it had been ripped from her chest, leaving behind a hollow, aching void. The baby inside her stirred, as if sensing her sorrow, and she clutched her belly, whispering, "We will be okay. We have to be." But the truth was, she did not know how. News of Kwame's betrayal spread through the village like wildfire. At first, people were stunned. Had they truly heard correctly? Had Kwame, a man once known for his wisdom and strength, abandoned his wife and unborn child for a younger woman? Then came the anger. The elders, men who had guided the village for decades, summoned Kwame. They sat in a solemn circle, their weathered faces hardened with disappointment. The eldest among them, Baba Django, tapped his staff against the ground and said, "You have shamed yourself, Kwame. You have turned your back on a woman who loved you, on a child who has yet to take its first breath. Do you not fear the wrath of the spirits?" Kwame met their gazes without flinching. "I have done what my heart commands," he said simply. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the circle. Baba Django sighed deeply, shaking his head. "Then may you live with the consequences." And so, the village turned against him. The women refused to greet him when he passed. The men no longer sought his counsel. The children, once eager to hear his stories, now avoided him. Kwame told himself he did not care. He had Zola now. That was enough. But for Amara, life became unbearable. With Kwame gone, she had no one to help her fetch water, no one to chop wood for the fire. Every movement was an effort, her swollen belly a constant reminder of the man who had left her. She could no longer go to the market without feeling the weight of the villagers' stares. Some pitied her. Others judged. She was too soft, they whispered. She should have fought harder to keep her husband. Only a few showed kindness. Old Mama Kofi would slip extra food into Amara's basket, pretending it was a mistake. A young girl, barely 12, would sometimes help her carry her load. But kindness did not fill the empty space where Kwame used to be. Nor did it chase away the fear that gripped her at night, the fear of giving birth alone, of raising a child without a father, of facing a world that suddenly felt so much colder. One evening, as she sat outside her hut, staring at the horizon where the sun bled into the earth, a shadow fell over her. It was an old woman. No one knew her real name. The villagers simply called her Bibi Nuru, grandmother of light. She was feared and respected, a woman whose eyes seemed to see into the depths of a person's soul. Bibi Nuru knelt beside Amara, placing a wrinkled hand on her belly. "The spirits have seen your suffering, child," she murmured. Amara's throat tightened. "They have also seen his betrayal," Bibi Nuru continued, her voice low, knowing. "Fate is never blind. Balance will be restored." A chill passed through Amara despite the warmth of the evening air. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Bibi Nuru's old lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You will see soon enough." And with that, she rose and disappeared into the night. Kwame and Zola were untouchable. Or so they believed. They spent their days basking in the glow of their love, laughing as they walked through the village, indifferent to the stares. Zola was everything Kwame had imagined, youthful, vibrant, free. She made him feel alive, made him forget the weight of his past. And yet, something lingered at the edges of his happiness. He ignored it when he noticed the villagers avoiding him. He brushed it aside when his own family refused to visit. But late at night, when Zola was asleep beside him, he would stare at the ceiling, an unease creeping into his chest. Had he truly made the right choice? Whenever doubt entered his mind, he reminded himself of Amara's tear-streaked face, the pain in her eyes when he had told her he no longer loved her. He had been cruel. But it had been necessary. Hadn't it? One night, as he lay beside Zola, his thoughts heavy, a sudden wind swept through their hut, chilling him to the bone. Zola shivered and turned to him, her brow furrowing. "Did you hear that?" Kwame frowned. "Hear what?" But even as he spoke, a whisper, low, distant, drifted through the air. He could not understand the words. But he understood the feeling. Something was coming. And fate was never blind. The night Amara went into labor, the skies over the village darkened unnaturally early. A heavy silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The elders, seated around the village fire, glanced at one another uneasily. The air was charged with something they could not name. And then, the first scream tore through the night. It came from Amara's hut, raw and desperate. The women of the village rushed to her side, their faces tight with worry. Mama Kofi, the village midwife, barked orders as they prepared warm water and cloth. Amara lay on a thin mat, her body trembling, drenched in sweat. Pain ripped through her in waves, each contraction feeling like it would break her. But she held on. For the child inside her. For herself. For the promise that fate had whispered through Bibi Nuru's lips. Kwame's misfortunes begin. Miles away, in the home Kwame had built with Zola, the air was restless. The night was thick with humidity, yet a cold draft curled through the room. Kwame tossed in his sleep, uneasy. The fire in their hut flickered violently, throwing strange shadows against the walls. Then the first crack of thunder split the sky. The wind howled as if the spirits themselves had been awakened. Outside, a loud crash sent a shock through the night. Kwame bolted upright as Zola shrieked, clutching the sheets around her. He stumbled out of bed and ran outside, his breath catching in his throat. His granary, the place where he stored all his harvest, had collapsed under the weight of the sudden storm. The heavy wooden beams lay shattered, his sacks of grain spilling into the mud, ruined beyond saving. Lightning streaked across the sky. And that was when he heard it. A single, haunting wail carried through the wind. It was distant, almost too far to be real. But Kwame knew that sound. It was Amara. A strange, foreboding chill slid down his spine. But Zola's voice snapped him back to the present. "This is bad, Kwame," she cried, her face twisted in frustration. "Without that grain, how will we eat? You need to fix this." Kwame barely heard her. His heart was pounding, his pulse erratic. Something was wrong. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. As the storm raged outside, Kwame and Zola's home trembled with each gust of wind. Zola sat by the fire, arms crossed, her face dark with irritation. "This is your fault," she snapped. Kwame turned to her, stunned. "What?" "You've angered the spirits," she said, her voice sharp. "Ever since you left that woman, nothing has gone right. First, the villagers shun us. Then, your family refuses to visit. And now, this?" She gestured to the destruction outside. "Maybe they're punishing you." Kwame's jaw tightened. "You were the one who said none of that mattered. That was before it started affecting me." Kwame stared at her, the words heavy in the air. She wasn't afraid for him. She wasn't even afraid for their future. She was afraid for herself. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. The woman he had once found so mesmerizing now seemed shallow. Selfish. Had she always been this way? Had he simply refused to see it? Another loud sound snapped him out of his thoughts. This time, it wasn't the storm. It was the bleating of his goats. Kwame rushed outside, his breath tight in his throat. What he saw made his blood run cold. His livestock, strong, healthy just that morning, now lay on the ground, motionless. Their breaths were shallow, their bodies weak. It made no sense. It was as if they were being drained of life itself. A shuddering wind wrapped around Kwame, and for the first time, true fear slithered into his chest. Something unnatural was happening. Something that had begun the moment he had turned his back on Amara. That night, Kwame couldn't sleep. The storm outside had settled into an eerie calm, but his mind was anything but still. At some point, exhaustion pulled him under. And that was when the nightmares began. He was standing in the middle of the village, but the sky above was a swirling, angry red. The ground beneath him cracked and shifted like living flesh. Then, he saw her. An old spirit, draped in tattered robes, her eyes glowing with something ancient and knowing. She floated toward him, her face neither cruel nor kind, simply watching, waiting. "Do you know why you suffer?" she asked. Kwame's mouth was dry. "The spirits are angry." "No," she said. "Love is angry." Kwame's chest tightened. The moment you turned your back on love, the spirit continued, her voice curling around him like smoke, you cursed your own fate. Kwame shook his head. No, The spirit raised a hand. And suddenly, Kwame was drowning. Dark waters pulled at him, dragged him under. The weight of regret pressed against his chest, suffocating him. He gasped, fighting, clawing. And then, he woke. Gasping for air, drenched in sweat, his heart slamming against his ribs. Zola groaned beside him. What's wrong with you? She muttered, rolling over. Kwame didn't answer. Because outside, in the stillness of the night, he heard it again. The distant wail. The cry of a woman in labor. A sound that sent a chill down his spine. A sound that told him fate had already decided his punishment. And it had only just begun. The first cries of Amara's newborn son pierced the heavy night air, a sound that carried through the village like the call of a new dawn. Inside the small hut, sweat drenched Amara's trembling body as she clutched the wailing infant to her chest. Tears of exhaustion and relief streamed down her face. The women around her cheered softly, their voices filled with warmth. He is strong, Mama Kofi said, wrapping the child in a soft cloth. A warrior's cry. A child of resilience. Amara looked down at her son. His tiny fingers curled against her skin, his breath warm against her chest. A storm had raged outside, but inside her heart, a quiet strength had taken root. She had done it. She had brought life into the world, even as the man who once swore to love her had abandoned her. The women bustled around, cleaning the space, preparing herbal teas to help Amara regain her strength. Outside, villagers whispered, their voices carrying through the cool night air. They had all witnessed Kwame's betrayal, but tonight, they stood in quiet reverence for the woman who had survived it. As the night stretched on, Amara held her child close, feeling an unshakable resolve settle within her. She did not need Kwame. She never had. And now, neither did her son. At the same time, across the village, Kwame sat in his now broken home, staring into the dying fire. His thoughts were restless, his mind unsettled. Something was wrong. The dream still clung to him, the spirit's words circling his head like vultures. His body felt weighed down by a nameless dread. Then he turned and saw it. The small wooden chest where he kept his earnings lay open, its contents gone. His heart lurched. He spun around. Zola? His voice was hoarse. But the hut was silent. Kwame rushed outside, his eyes scanning the darkness. His stomach twisted as he spotted something in the distance. Footprints. Leading away. Panic gripped his chest as he ran down the narrow path leading to the edge of the village. And there she was. Zola. Walking toward the forest's edge, a small bundle of belongings slung over her shoulder. His breath hitched. Zola! She stopped but did not turn around. Kwame reached her in seconds, grabbing her arm. Where are you going? Zola exhaled, her posture relaxed, unbothered. Away. Kwame's fingers tightened around her wrist. What do you mean, away? His voice cracked. Zola finally turned to face him, and for the first time, Kwame saw her clearly. The softness in her eyes was gone, replaced by cold indifference. I never planned to stay, she said simply. You were fun. Your wealth was useful. But now, you have nothing left. Kwame felt as though he had been struck. Zola, I left everything for you. And that was your mistake, she said, prying his fingers off her wrist. You thought I wanted your love? A bitter laugh escaped her lips. No, Kwame. I wanted what you could give me. And now you have nothing left to give. The words burned. Kwame stumbled back, shaking his head. No, you love me. Zola smirked. I love the foolishness of men like you. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the night. Kwame stood frozen, the weight of her words crushing him. He had left his wife. His child. his honor. For a woman who never truly wanted him. And now, he was alone. For the first time in his life, Kwame felt hollow. Zola was gone. His home was falling apart. The village had turned its back on him. He had lost everything. But one thing remained. Amara. His feet carried him through the village, his breath ragged. His heart pounded as he reached her hut, his hands trembling as he knocked. Silence. He knocked again, more urgently. Amara. Please. The door opened just a crack, and Mama Kofi stepped out, her face unreadable. Kwame's throat tightened. I need to see her. Mama Kofi studied him, then shook her head. She does not wish to see you. Kwame flinched as though struck. Please, he whispered. I was a fool. I was blinded. But I have nowhere else to go. Mama Kofi's gaze softened for a brief moment, but then she squared her shoulders. Now you see. The spirits do not punish unjustly. I know, Kwame choked out. I know. She gave birth to your son tonight. Kwame's knees nearly buckled. A son. His son. A fresh wave of regret crushed him. Please, he begged. Let me see them. Mama Kofi's expression turned hard. No. Kwame's breath hitched. She does not want you near her, she said. And who could blame her? Kwame wanted to protest, wanted to fight, but deep inside, he knew this was his punishment. This was what the spirit had warned him of. This was justice. Kwame remained outside the hut, silent, unmoving. He did not know how long he stood there, staring at the door that would never open for him. But soon, he realized he was not alone. The village had gathered. Men, women, elders, all watching him with the same expression. Pity. Disgust. Finality. You have reaped what you have sown, Elder Otto finally said, his voice heavy with authority. Kwame did not respond. He could not. The elders stepped forward, standing in a line before him. You dishonored your home, Elder Amma spoke. You turned your back on your wife, on your child, on your people. And now, you stand before us, without love, without wealth, without honor. Kwame swallowed hard, his hands shaking. We do not need to cast you out, Kwame, Elder Otto continued. For you are already a man without a place. The words hit deeper than any punishment they could have given. Kwame sank to his knees, his head bowed, shame washing over him like a tide. He had thought he was gaining a new life. Instead, he had lost everything. And now, there was nothing left but regret. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the village. Kwame sat outside his crumbling hut, his head resting in his hands. His clothes were tattered, his skin dull from days spent wandering aimlessly. He had once been a man of pride, a man of wealth and status. Now, he was a ghost haunting the very place he once called home. His business had collapsed. His so-called friends, those who had once praised him for leaving Amara for the younger, more beautiful Zola, had vanished the moment his fortune dried up. He was alone. No livestock. No crops. No love. Nothing. The spirits had taken everything from him. And Amara? She thrived. Amara moved through the village with grace, her smile warmer than the morning sun. The weight of the past had lifted from her shoulders, replaced by the love of her people and the joy of her son. Her child, Kofi, was the pride of the village. Strong, curious, and full of life, he was growing under the guidance of wise elders and the unwavering love of his mother. Where once Amara had walked with the burden of betrayal, now she walked with purpose. Women of the village came to her for advice. The elders spoke to her with newfound respect. Even the men who had once doubted her strength now bowed their heads in silent admiration. She had survived the worst storm of her life. And she had won. But Kwame? Kwame had become nothing more than a fading whisper. One evening, as the village prepared for the night, an old woman approached Kwame's hut. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her presence carrying the weight of something unseen, something beyond the physical world. The villagers watched in silence as she made her way to the broken man sitting outside his home. Kwame barely noticed her until she was standing before him. The same old woman who had once warned Amara. The same one who had foreseen his downfall. She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You did not listen," she said softly. Kwame looked up at her, his eyes hollow, his face worn with regret. "I know," he whispered. The old woman nodded. "The spirits do not punish without reason." Kwame swallowed hard. "Is there nothing I can do? Nothing to fix what I have broken?" The old woman tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "The spirits have marked you, Kwame. Your fate is sealed." But, she trailed off, her gaze shifting toward the heart of the village. Toward Amara. Kwame followed her eyes, his chest tightening. "Go to her," the woman finally said. "But know this, some wounds never heal." Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared into the night. The next morning, Kwame gathered what little dignity he had left and made his way toward Amara's hut. His hands trembled as he walked, his breath uneven. Would she even look at him? Would she send him away without a word? He had nothing left to offer her, no riches, no status. Only his regret. As he approached, he saw Amara sitting outside, braiding her son's hair. She looked peaceful. Strong. The sight nearly brought him to his knees. Kofi spotted him first, his young eyes filled with curiosity. He tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mama, who is that man?" The words struck Kwame harder than he expected. He was nothing but a stranger to his own son. Amara's hands froze. Slowly, she looked up, her gaze meeting Kwame's. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Kwame's throat tightened. He wanted to say so much. To beg. To weep. But the words would not come. Finally, he managed to whisper, "Amara." She remained silent, her expression unreadable. Kwame fell to his knees. "Please. I have lost everything. I have suffered. His voice cracked. "I was a fool." Still, Amara did not speak. Kwame's vision blurred with unshed tears. "I don't ask for much. Just say that you forgive me." A long silence stretched between them. The villagers had begun to gather, watching the scene unfold. Finally, Amara sighed. She looked down at her son, brushing a hand over his hair before rising to her feet. She stepped forward until she stood directly in front of Kwame. He looked up at her, desperate. Then she spoke. "Some wounds never heal, Kwame." Her voice was not cruel, nor was it filled with hatred. It was calm. Final. Kwame's heart shattered. Amara looked at him for a moment longer before turning back to her son. She lifted the boy into her arms and walked inside her home, closing the door behind her. Leaving Kwame in the dust. The villagers murmured amongst themselves, some shaking their heads, others watching with quiet approval. Kwame remained on his knees, staring at the closed door. It was over. There was no redemption. No second chances. Only the weight of his own choices pressing down on him. From that day forward, Kwame wandered the village like a ghost. No one spoke to him. No one acknowledged him. He had become invisible, a cautionary tale whispered among the villagers. The man who traded love for temptation. The man who lost everything. His home fell deeper into ruin, his body growing weaker with each passing day. One night, as he lay beneath the open sky, he stared up at the stars, wondering if the spirits were still watching. Wondering if they pitied him. But deep inside, he knew the truth. This was his fate. And there was no escaping it. Kwame no longer walked with the pride of a man who once had everything. His back was hunched, his steps slow. The village no longer whispered about him, his name was spoken openly, but only as a lesson, a warning passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. His days of wealth and power were gone. His nights were filled with regret. Yet, the spirits had not taken everything from him. They had left him with time. Time to reflect. Time to teach. Time to ensure that no other man in the village would ever make the same mistake. The old woman who had once warned Amara found Kwame again. She stood before him as he sat outside his crumbling hut, staring into the distance. "You still seek forgiveness," she said. Kwame nodded, though he knew by now that Amara's heart had long since moved past him. The old woman sighed. "Forgiveness does not always come in the way we wish." Kwame swallowed, his throat dry. "Then what am I supposed to do?" The old woman studied him for a long moment before speaking. "There is only one path left for you, Kwame. Teach the young men of this village. Tell them your story so that none may repeat it. Humility and acceptance, these are the only things left for you." Kwame closed his eyes, letting the words settle deep within his soul. When he opened them again, the old woman was gone. But he understood. At first, the young men of the village mocked him. "What could a man like you teach us?" one of them scoffed. "You lost everything." Kwame did not argue. He only nodded. "Yes," he admitted, "I did." The others laughed. But Kwame did not falter. Day after day, he sat outside the gathering hut, waiting for any who would listen. He spoke of love, not as a thing to be taken lightly, but as something sacred. He spoke of betrayal, not as an act of strength, but as a curse upon the soul. And he spoke of regret, not as a wound that fades, but as a weight that grows heavier with time. Slowly, the laughter died. The young men began to listen. They watched the way the village shunned him, the way Amara thrived without him. And they understood. One by one, they came to him, asking questions, seeking guidance. "Kwame," one of them asked one evening, "if you could go back, what would you do differently?" Kwame's heart ached. "Everything," he whispered. Meanwhile, Amara's life blossomed. She grew a prosperous business, selling handmade cloth that became known far beyond their village. Her son, Kofi, was growing into a fine young man. He was wise. Strong. But most importantly, he was nothing like his father. Amara ensured that. She raised him with love, but she also taught him the truth of his father's downfall. She made sure he understood the weight of betrayal, the power of loyalty. One day, Kofi asked her, "Do you still hate him?" Amara paused. Then she thought about the man Kwame had become, the broken, humbled figure who now spent his days teaching others to be better. Finally, she answered, "No, my son. I do not hate him." Kofi frowned. "Then why do you not forgive him?" Amara smiled sadly. "Because some wounds never heal." Kofi nodded, his mother's wisdom sinking deep into his heart. A story passed down. The years went by. Kwame grew older. The young men he had mentored became husbands, fathers, leaders. None of them abandoned their wives for fleeting temptations. None of them forgot his lessons. His name became legend. Not as the great man he once was, but as a warning. Fathers told their sons, "Remember Kwame, who had everything and threw it away." Mothers told their daughters, "Remember Amara, who was strong even when love betrayed her."